Dubai. They're either not doing enough, they're not experienced enough, they've got it easy raking in a percentage of every apartment sold or leased. But is that the case? And for that reason, our topic today is a day in the life of a real estate broker.
Understanding property on Drive Live.
Just how difficult is it to get clients, make clients happy, earn a living as a real estate agent here in Dubai? And how much can you expect from your broker as well? Let me introduce who we have in studio with us this hour, Nick Grassick, who's the Managing Director at PH Real Estate. Nice to have you in, Nick.
Good afternoon, hi.
So we'll be talking about all of this over the next hour or so, just trying to better understand the ins and outs of what you do here in Dubai. Okay. Not all of us understand, but it's something that we all deal with when we come to Dubai. Either we're looking to buy a place or rent a place. So most of us, it'd be safe to say, deal with a real estate broker at one point or another in our experience here in Dubai. It'll be interesting to understand what we should all expect from a broker. So your questions to 4001, or of course you can call us. Here's that number again, 04-423 1010. Nick, I just want to start off with your experience first of all. You've been in real estate how long and how did you get into it?
I kind of fell into it from college, so I'm pushing 23 years now in agency. First 10 years in the UK, then moved over to Sydney for about 5 years, and then picked just the perfect timing to move to Dubai, coming up on 8 years ago, just after the market had imploded here.
We just discussed that off air, that you were lucky enough to move in 2 months after or something, weren't you?
Exactly. So just as the ball had stopped rolling. So it was an interesting time. But having been in agency for, it makes you feel old when you say 23 years, I've kind of worked through 5 recessionary markets now.
Wow.
So getting here when the market wasn't at its peak, it throws up challenges, but it also throws up opportunities as well.
No one can accuse you of not having any experience. Let's just put it that way, first of all.
Absolutely. You know, you work out ways to service both the seller and the buyer to identify what it is that they're looking for, because if the market is on the rise, well then it's the buyers who are chasing the seller's figure. And conversely, when the market isn't so great and it's considered a buyer's market, well then you're trying to do the best for your seller. So I think that's maybe why estate agents do get, sometimes unfortunately deservedly, but other times undeservedly, a bit of a bad rap. Because whilst you're trying to make one party happy, you can't always make both.
This is something I want to touch on, but we'll get to this later. Of course, if you are trying to rent a property or you're trying to buy a property, you are usually going to be the one paying the fee to the broker. But should that be the case? Are you always working in the buyer or the tenant's interest? We'll come back to that in just a moment. But I wanted to ask you about this. Do you think it's too easy to become an agent here? You said sometimes, well, you do get a bad rap. A lot of people say that brokers here don't have enough experience. In your opinion, do you think it's too easy?
It used to be. When I first got here, I remember my RERA training. It was 2 days, and then I had an exam. The pass rate, it was a number of years ago now, obviously, but from memory it was about 65%, whereas now, when our consultants join us, it's a 4-day residential course, and then there is the exam at the end of it, and the pass rate has now increased to 85%. Outside of the educational process, which has naturally developed, you know, the real estate market here is still maturing. Outside of that, I think that the general public, the consumer, now they require a better level of service. The marketplace is significantly different now to what it was when I first got here. It was primarily driven by cash-rich investors, who ultimately it was all driven by the bottom line, whereas now, and I would suggest maybe 2, possibly even 3 years ago, the market started to see a significant shift towards end users, owner-occupiers, mortgage buyers. We're now talking about family homes, and when a family is purchasing a home, there's much more emotional involvement. Yeah. There's a much longer, normally, process which the buyer will go through, because it's ultimately where they and their children are going to make a home. So because there is so much more importance placed upon this purchase. Understandably, buyers, as well as sellers, when you're talking to home occupiers, home sellers, buyers and sellers are demanding a better level of service now. So,
how do you find a better level of service? How should you start looking? There are so many different agencies and there are so many different property listings. Either you go to a listing, find who's representing that and deal with that agent. What's recommended though?
So I guess if you're a seller, it is, if you can, invite the agent, the consultant. I mean, we call our guys consultants as opposed to brokers because I'd like to think that it offers a subtle difference. But if you're the seller, invite them out to your home. Sit down, talk to them. You know, if you are a homeowner, if you're a home seller, you're placing possibly your largest asset in their hands. And over the course of a coffee and a conversation, you'll get an understanding of whether or not this person has your interest at heart or whether or not they're just there to get the commission. In addition to obviously finding out what their marketing efforts are going to be. Now, if you're a buyer, I would suggest in the course of the initial conversation, whereby if you're asking questions about the property, first impressions last, obviously. You will rapidly get an understanding of what is the level of this consultant's understanding of not only the property that you're inquiring about, but also the surrounding location. What are the features? What are the benefits? What are the alternative suggestions? And this is key for either a tenant or a buyer who are at the beginning of their search, whereby they perhaps identified we need 3 bedrooms. We ideally want to be in a certain location because of work or social aspects or even schools for the children. But beyond that, they haven't really got much of an idea of what it is that is available to them. We offer, PH is the name of our company now. We were previously known before we rebranded at the beginning of the year as Powerhouse. And that name might be, or it might resonate more with people out there. Powerhouse go back 8 years. But what we have developed over that period is a home search service, whereby our consultants are trained to take a genuine brief from a buyer. And on the back of that brief, then start to look at, on a macro level, what are the localized communities? What are the 2 or 3 recommended areas within which the buyer might want to buy or to rent? And then once that's been established, then you can start to have a look at the micro level. You know, what are the number of checks that we're going to be able to secure for you? What is it that, what's the most important thing? Is it a new kitchen, or is it something which they can take in reasonably original conditions, therefore they can save and they make the family their home? But it is a process that we hopefully, and we're quite successful in this, instill in our guys to talk through people that home search process.
When we come back, I'll ask you more about marketing, what actually goes into that for a particular property, and also what a day is like for you guys. Pretty much when you wake up, when do you finish for the day? Just how difficult is that a job here in Dubai as a broker? We've got texts coming in as well. Here's the first one. Are we in a buyer's or seller's market? Your opinion on that. What's your view on the greens? Robbo writes in as well and says, can I use my own appointed agent to view or deal on any rental property? We'll get the answers to those questions just after the news update. Any more of your questions, always welcome to 4001. We'll have Nick Grassick in with us through to 5 o'clock.
It's the 4 to 5 on Drive Live with Tim Elliott and Alex Hershey.
On DubaiEye 103.8.
DubaiEye News.
In association with
The app and message for free.
We're talking about a day in the life of a broker here, a real estate agent here in Dubai. If you have any questions, keep them coming through. 4001.
DubaiEye traffic.
Yeah, still looking pretty clear out there at the moment.
Tim Elliott and Alex Hershey.
on DubaiEye 103.8.
Very good afternoon. Tim's away for a few weeks. David joins me on the show today and for the rest of the week. So it's David and Alex here with you through to 7 o'clock. And we're talking property.
Understanding property on Drive Live.
Nick Grassick is here from PH Real Estate. Nick, so nice to have you in. Let's go straight to the text line, shall we, and ask you a couple of these questions. First text in, no name on this, just saying, are we in a buyer's or seller's market, first of all? Secondly, what's your view on apartments in the Greens? Any thoughts?
So I think it's generally perceived and generally accepted that the market is still very much a buyer's marketplace. A lot of the reports that come out from the corporate agents, the Jones Lang LaSalle, the C.B. Richard Ellis, these guys, are still pointing towards softening in house sale prices, and also that then reflects in the rental amounts. Having said that, though, you do find, invariably, it's the basic economics of supply and demand, you do then find that there will be pockets whereby certain suburbs, certain communities, they may have contracted at a slightly faster pace than perhaps others. You'll then invariably get greater resistance from either seller or landlord, and ultimately, a home is worth what someone's prepared to pay for it, or what someone's prepared to rent for it. If there is a lack of availability, and there is invariably at certain times a flight towards quality, the text that you had in mentioned about the Greens. People who live in the Greens will know that it's two separate communities. You have the old Greens and then the new, and the new are typically a little more expensive because they're newer properties. They sit alongside the golf course and. If people can afford it, if they have the budget, when they want to be within the Greens, then they quite often gravitate towards the new Greens, and that then starts to reduce the volume of property that you then have the ability to be able to live in. And ultimately, we speak to buyers on a daily basis that will say to us, we're looking for this type of property, this square footage, it must have this view, and when you're consulting to a buyer, then you should be getting to the point of knowing exactly what it is that they're looking for. If there's very few of those properties available, then you can sometimes find, even in a market like today, that they will still sell at a premium because it's what the buyer or the tenant deems that home to be worth.
Okay, fair enough. Here's one in from Robbo for you, Nick. Can I use my own appointed agent to view or deal on any rental property?
Absolutely. You can go to a consultant or a brokerage, and you can establish a relationship whereby, because typically the buyer or the tenant is paying the fee to the company. Once you have that level of rapport, once you have that trust, and trust is something which is really quite important in this sector, in this marketplace, you can then engage the services of that individual, and you can then give them a brief, and they can go out there and speak to third-party consultants, look to bring back to you or refine and present to you a shortlist, and that's actually quite a nice way of managing the process.
So we've got a text in from Harry, who wants to know whether there is a rent-to-own available scheme in Dubai now, and perhaps are there other innovations that have been sort of introduced into Dubai that perhaps they're used in other parts of the world? So
with regards to rent-to-buy, when you're looking into financial services products, it's not something that as an estate agency that we are able to offer or develop. We obviously refer to and we work alongside mortgage services and financial services institutions. I have to be honest, I'm not aware of a strict rent-to-buy as I used to know back in the UK. In the UK, because it is a more mature environment, and bearing in mind, you're also going back a good 14, 15 years now, so I don't even know if these things are still available today, but when I worked there, you could co-partner alongside a local authority, a local council. You could rent 50% of the value from the council, and you could then take out a mortgage for the remaining 50%. Right. And that was seen as an affordable way to enter the marketplace. Those things, to my knowledge, are not available at the moment. The central bank here in Dubai, about 2.5 years ago now, implemented rather sweeping changes to the lending criteria, which were required at the time because we were heading back towards a little bit of a mini boom. So the restrictions in place here at the moment are quite stringent, whereby up to a certain amount, up to 5 million dirhams, a buyer is required to pay a minimum of 25% of the purchase amount as a deposit, and above 5 million dirhams, it's a minimum of 35%. Now that does restrict the entry level to the marketplace, which as a consequence then had a cooling effect on the market. If the central bank or if the financial institutions were to get together and start to become more flexible in their lending criteria, From experience, that would have a significant effect, or potentially a significant effect, on the residual values of properties, because you suddenly open up home ownership to a much wider audience, and you then suddenly become more towards a swing of a larger buyer pool, chasing a smaller property marketplace, which can then start to push prices up. I know that there are developers that we currently speak to at the moment who are devising easier entry levels into the marketplace, whereby they will offer payment plans themselves. A certain amount is payable to reserve the unit, and then over an agreed defined period, certain instalments are made directly to the developer to ultimately pay for the home.
Or I've seen, I was just sent an SMS yesterday from a developer saying they'll pay the land department fee or the transaction fee or something else. So there are offers out there.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'd say the other thing, do you get the impression there are so many people out there perhaps waiting to pounce and buy a property, but they're still a little bit scared and they're perhaps waiting for the right mechanism to be there, such as the ones you've mentioned?
Most definitely. When you have a look at the comparisons between what the average person pays in rent and then what the mortgage repayment would be to buy that same property, the only real barrier to the entry of to actually purchase is the significant amounts of money which is required as a cash deposit, which then coupled with things like the land department transfer fees. So yes, I mean, for as long as the rents remain at their current levels and it is more affordable on a monthly basis to be able to buy a property, everybody would rather own the house that they live in as opposed to rent it from somebody else.
Granville takes in just about affordable housing or making it more affordable to buy here. He says, could the affordable housing boom cause a real estate bubble like the previous US housing crisis? Thoughts?
That's a good one. I think provided that the financial institutions take note of what happened before. And affordable housing doesn't necessarily mean that it's subprime lending.
Yeah.
Subprime lending came about because of the financial institutions essentially offering mortgages to people that didn't perhaps have a great credit history, and therefore they became a risk. Affordable housing is exactly that. You can still have in place a very robust, stringent, well-regulated financial services marketplace whereby buyers are properly vetted as to whether or not they should be allowed to lend a certain amount of money from an institution, but they're simply buying at a more affordable level.
Yeah, and maybe not such a huge down payment or deposit, first of all, not deposit, cash. Bob writes in and says, what are your thoughts on buying in Dubai land?
As every area, there are pluses and minuses, you know.
What do you know about the area that you would think, okay, these are going to be the great things that you should consider about buying there, and you need to be, also need to consider what's happening around that, maybe some negative side effects of, I don't know, what else is coming up around that particular development?
Well, I think the positives, moment, because of the levels of infrastructure investment that's taken place out there, the downsides, you may be living in an area which doesn't have quite the social aspect, if you like, as somewhere more mature like downtown or perhaps Dubai Marina, where the retail facilities aren't as many. But the plus side to that is that will be reflected in the purchase amount. And if you buy a property in any area whereby there is ongoing infrastructure investment, whether that be healthcare, education, retail, as these things build and develop around it, so that will naturally add to the value of your home. But I do think that more so in Dubai, because this city has exploded. It's been created over the last 20-25 years, and it's still moving at an incredible pace. People do tend to get a little hung up in, if I buy it now, what will it be worth in 3 or 5 years' time?
Yeah, we're not thinking long term, are we really?
Absolutely. If you're looking to move into a home, buy a home, because a home you will normally live in for 3 to 5 years, and then you'll make a decision. Having worked in both London and also Sydney, where people take a much more pragmatic view, in as much as we need something that meets our requirements. It's got to allow us to grow as either a family or in terms of work opportunities, and then it needs to be affordable. And that's kind of where it gets capped. The how can I make all of this money in such a short period? That's really only been instilled in the mentality of Dubai, I believe, because of how rapidly this marketplace has grown.
And also, I suppose, because not many of us feel like we may be here in more than 5 years' time. So we've got to think about why we're buying a property. And a lot of the time, if it's not to live in for 20, 25 years, it's as an investment. It's something to make money on, surely.
Yes, but it's not to say that when you leave the country that you need to sell it.
Yeah.
We deal with, on a daily basis, international buyers and sellers, and these aren't just investors. These are families who have lived here for a period. For one reason or other, they have moved on to a different company or returned to their home country, and because the marketplace here is developing, there are becoming more, again, use the word robust, structures in place, managed by people like RERA, that ensure that property management now is much more viable proposition as a hands-off investment than perhaps what it used to be. I have come from London and I've got a place back in the UK. I married a lady from Sydney. She's got a place back in Oz. We didn't sell these things when we moved here.
I guess following on from that, really, put you on the spot a bit. How quickly did you buy a place here, or did you not buy a place? Are you renting?
We bought here. We bought here 3 and a bit years ago. To be perfectly honest, for no other reason than circumstances changed 3 and a bit years ago. We decided to get married. We were going to have a family. We decided that this was going to be our home for a longer period than what we previously thought before that.
When we come back, we'll get to more of your texts coming in on 4001. Does the seller have to pay 2% commission, or is all the commission to agents paid by the buyer? That's one of the texts coming in. Shoaib, we've got yours as well, so we'll get the answers to your questions right after this. Plus, I want to get back to this, what the expectations of a client are when it comes to your job. So what do people expect you to do on a day-to-day basis, and are they right in assuming that is your job? We've got Nick Grassick here in from PH Real Estate. More next.
Drive Live.
Managing Director at PH Real Estate. So nice to have you in, Nick. Inundated with questions here on the text line, and we'll come back to a few of them in just a minute. I'd like to ask you a little bit about what you do every day and what the expectations are on a broker for what they deliver to a client. First of all, what do people, when they come to you and either they want to buy a property or they want to rent a property, what do they expect you to do in your job, in your role as a broker here?
Well, first and foremost, deliver options for them. If we take a buyer, whether a buyer be at the beginning of their search, whereby they have taken mortgage advice, they have a budget in mind, they obviously know how many bedrooms they're looking for, and 9 times out of 10 people will know if they want an apartment living or if they want a villa. But beyond that, the consultant really needs to then demonstrate what they're charging the buyer for.
Yeah.
Which should be, to begin with, presenting a shortlist of not only just the different types of villas but also the different areas, and that should then be accompanied by a little bit of information as to why perhaps people want to buy in that area. Now, that's for people right at the beginning of their search. If you're then talking to a buyer who has already completed that investigative process, shall we call it, and have a good idea, okay, it's going to be the Springs and it's in this area and we need this type of villa, the buyer is then really entitled to a level of service whereby the consultant should be actually listening to the buyer and coming back to them within an agreed time frame with relevant options. All too often we speak to buyers who are becoming increasingly frustrated at having spoken to somebody, some brokerage, and continuously offered the same type of properties, because as somebody else asked a moment ago, a buyer or a tenant can engage the services of a particular consultant who will then go out and speak to the external marketplace. And quite often sellers, because the norm is that buyers will pay the fee and not sellers, sellers or landlords can list their property, can advertise their property for sale or for rent with multiple brokers. So one of the frustrations that we find with buyers and indeed tenants is where they are speaking to a variety of different consultants but being referred back or being presented with the same property over and over again. And that's simply because the consultant perhaps hasn't actually taken the time to understand. So I think it's a level of service.
Do you think it's right that the buyer or the tenant is the one to pay the commission, the 2 or 4% or whatever it may be to the broker? Because in a lot of cases it just seems counterintuitive, because if you are representing the tenant, of course as a broker you'd also want to get the most amount of money, because of course you'd get paid more in that circumstance. You'd get a percentage of whatever you lease that apartment for. That will be higher. It will be in your best interest to get more, to rent it for more. But of course, the tenant is paying you that fee. So how does that work here?
So this was a strange one, which I had to get my head around when I first moved here, because having worked in, again, London and Sydney, whereby it's the seller, the vendor, the landlord who pays the fee. First of all, the difference that it makes to the consultant's commission, because on a typical sale, the buyer will pay 2% of that purchase amount. Now, as I've already suggested, a house or a home is worth what somebody's prepared to pay for it. Yes, you can ask a higher price, and if you're acting for the seller, you can try and secure the best possible price for the seller. But that doesn't translate to a huge amount of money in terms of the broker's commission. So, it should be more of the mindset that the broker should be looking to deliver a level of service so that he picks up future work, as opposed to how can I create an extra 100 dirhams out of this, or how can I
But do you feel that's what a lot of real estate brokers here do, that's their mindset, or do you feel that they're actually doing the right thing? The majority?
I would like to say the majority at this stage now.
Okay.
Because the actual amount that it relates to in terms of the consultant's pocket is not a huge amount. And if we do accept, and with regards to whether or not it's right that buyers should pay the fee, the Land Department guidelines suggest that it should be apportioned equally. It should be 1% buyer, 1% seller. Market forces dictate that prices which are advertised and therefore the amounts which are negotiated and discussed with sellers are always net to seller. The Land Department fee should be 2% buyer, 2% seller. But because when buyers and sellers are discussing amounts, it is always considered net to seller, somebody needs to pay these mandatory statutory charges.
And it usually ends up being the buyer in that case.
As a result of market forces. Yeah.
Let's go to the text line again.
Yeah, we've got a couple of good ones in here. I mean, there's no name here, but someone says, purely a statement, the problem is 5 million dirhams buys you an average 3-bedroom house in the Springs or a castle in Scotland. You just don't get a lot for your money here. Someone else, more of a question, again no name here, but do you feel that real estate brokers in Dubai have a bad reputation because the industry and its employees are not taken seriously? They're saying, for instance, anyone can work in real estate here, whether they have the area knowledge, qualifications, even basic customer service skills. I mean, can anybody just pitch up from another country where they've sold property and say, right, I'm here, I'm going to sell property?
You can do. You need to obviously attend the RERA course. You need to graduate from that. You need to pass the exam. You need to be employed by a company who will then also offer you a business visa. So there are entry points to the marketplace, and if the individual is not professional, if they don't possess a level of industry experience or marketplace knowledge or a level of, adding value, then they won't be employed that long.
They get found out.
Yeah.
How much experience do you have to have in particular areas here in Dubai? After, say, you take the exam, it's 4 days now. If you've taken that, you've gained all the knowledge that you need to be able to pass that test. What do you come out of that test with? Do you know certain areas here in Dubai?
No, the real exam and the training is more about the mechanics.
Okay.
It's understanding how the system works and how it's policed, so that you work in an ethical, professional manner. With regards to understanding the areas, the locations in which you're going to work, that then becomes the responsibility of the company. We, like most other agencies now, employ consultants who are specialists within certain areas, and that then encourages them to become the specialist, the go-to person within that space.
When actually, that's pretty much all the time we have for property this hour, Nick. We've got a couple more questions in for you, but we'll grab you for 5 minutes so you can write back to these. It's just, does the seller have to pay 2% commission, or is all commission to agents paid by the buyer? And also, we'll pop those answers up on our Drive Live blog. So if you would like to head there and check them out, you can do this time tomorrow, Drive Live blog. So you can find that DubaiEye1038.com. And all the answers to those questions will be up there. A big thank you to you, Nick Grassick, the Managing Director of PH Real Estate. Hopefully we'll have you back in studio sometime soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's the 4 to 5 on Drive Live with Tim Elliott and Alex Hershey.
On Dubai Eye 103.8. On Emirates, we